Thank you so much. All right, and I'm going to invite Delegate Ruff to the front to offer brief words, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Absolutely. The energy is obvious and palpable here today. No worries. Darn technology. No, I really, really appreciate everybody and their support of this wonderful, wonderful space. My name is Maryland State Delegate Malcolm P. Ruff. I'm one of the delegates in Annapolis for this very district where this awesome space exists. And that's just by chance and luck on my part that I am able to claim this space as a part of the community that I represent in our state legislature. I just want to offer to Sydney and everybody that has been working to make sure that this space is available and has been reclaimed and is going to be a part of the powerful uplift of this community, of Baltimore City, of the artist community. Thank you. My deep, deep, deep gratitude. I grew up on the west side of Baltimore City, and my mother, her name is Martha Ruff. If you've ever seen the Griot Circle of Maryland, she goes by Sister Martha. She's a life member, and I grew up as a growing griot, knowing that my mother was an acolyte of Lucille. Having worked in the Enoch Pratt Library, I'm sure that's where she became a follower, a disciple, someone who was an admirer and lived in her legacy. And when you talked about your family doing what was necessary without even thinking about it, I know that she lived in that because she sacrificed her career to make sure that I would have the top education possible by becoming a librarian at Gilman School, which is also in the district, but she was not down to be with them white folk. She was there for 6 years, and once I got in, she immediately went and became a librarian at the NAACP. So I say all that to say, please continue to stay engaged. I know Brother Diaz was talking about how high the numbers are on the requests, but if we are not going to sacrifice to save spaces and to restore spaces and to support spaces that are reclaiming our legacies, and that's me telling me to go somewhere else, who else is going to do it? We are all we got, but we are also all that we need. And so I appreciate you all for allowing me to be here and to be a part of this this celebration. And I hope that you all enjoy every moment that the rest of this day brings. So thank you guys very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. My name is Camille Bacon. I am the editor-in-chief of Jupiter Magazine, and I'm here to introduce our glorious artist panel. In preparation for this celebration, I have carried this book everywhere that I go, and I read aloud one Lucille Clifton poem a day. And before I introduce the panel, Miss Joyce J. Scott is going to take us to church.
I am? Yes. I'm going to ask you to hold that if I can. Well, I was asked to read it, but I thought, why not sing it? The spirit walked in through the door of this flesh's house. The rooms leading off from the hall burn with color. The spirit feels the door behind her close, and the sinister hall is thick with the one word, choose. The poet walks in through the door of the scholar's house. The rooms leading off from the hall buzz with language. The poet feels the door behind her close, and the sinister hall, in dark with the one word, choose. Wow. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina.
There is a Miss Lucille Clifton poem for any possible state of being you might find yourself in. Like Miss Honorée F Jeffers said last night, quote, "For every moment of my life, there was a Lucille Clifton poem to guide me," unquote. Indeed, that grand and laconic language of hers is a pendulum swing that leaves no corner of our lives untouched. For hers was a poetry decanted from the sweep of her all-encompassing attention and from the totality of her witnessing. In the foreword for How to Carry Water, selected poems of Lucille Clifton, Araceli Ghee says, quote, "No one writes like Lucille Clifton. And yet, if it were possible to open a voice like a suitcase, to see what it carries inside it, I believe that inside the voices of many contemporary US American poets are the poems of Lucille Clifton. And likewise, if we were to unzip the artworks of Kennedy Yanko, Miss Joyce J. Scott, and Phylicia Ghee, like a suitcase, we are certain to find edges of Miss Lucille's poems therein too. Kennedy Yanko found inspiration for her 2023 solo exhibition, She is a Verb, in the poetry of Lucille Clifton. In particular, Yanko used Won't You Celebrate With Me as the tipping point for a series of work made from copper and paint skin, illuminating Clifton's triumphant poem by fashioning beauty out of discarded material. Yanko has described copper as a material of ease and grace, which she has, quote, shaped, similar to the life shaped by Clifton in Won't You Celebrate With Me. Yanko's She is a Verb represents the joining of poetry and abstraction, or as she describes it, constellations. A sculptor and installation artist, Yanko was an artist in residence at the Rouval Museum and has been included in institutional exhibitions such as the Museum of Contemporary Art Detroit and the Urban Institute for Contemporary Artists. Miss Joyce J. Scott delves into the extremes of human nature by conflating humor and horror, as well as beauty and brutality. Scott's primarily figurative sculptures infuse a deep sense of humanity into complex societal and political issues. She's developed a trademark free-form and off-loom glass bead weaving with that of blown glass and found objects, embedding cultural critique within the pleasurable experiences of viewing a pristinely crafted object. Her work mines history to better understand the present moment. Scott lives and works in Baltimore, East Baltimore specifically.
West.
Excuse me. West Baltimore. Joyce J. Scott received a BFA from the Maryland Institute of Contemporary Art and an MFA from Instituto Allende in Mexico. She's a 2016 MacArthur Genius Fellow, and her work was recently featured in the March 2025 issue of Art Forum. Scott's artwork has received wide acclaim with solo museum exhibitions at the Baltimore Museum of Art in 2024. And her presentation at the Seattle Art Museum just closed in January of 2025. As a contemporary of Lucille Clifton and Fred Clifton, we're looking forward to her engagement with the Clifton House via this conversation. Phylicia Ghee is a curator and interdisciplinary visual artist who works in photography, performance, video, fibers, mixed media, installation, and painting. Ghee's artwork documents transition, explores healing, memory, ritual, ceremony, and personal rites of passage. She earned her BFA in photography with a concentration in curatorial studies from the Maryland Institute College of Art in 2010. Ghee has taught workshops and held day-long retreats in Baltimore, Maryland, New Orleans, Louisiana, and Ibadan, Nigeria, exploring photography, installation, assemblage, and the powerful connection between art and healing. In 2021, she received the Maryland State Arts Council Independent Artist Award, recognizing notable artistic achievement. She's a certified Yoga Nidra facilitator, and she is in apprenticeship to become a clinical herbalist. In addition to her art practice, she has worked as a professional photographer for over 19 years. She's the first Black woman and only one of 21 photographers in American history to work as official photographer for the U.S. Capitol House of Representatives. And with that, I present to you our panel for this afternoon.
Thank you, Camille, for that spirited introduction, and thank you so much to Sydney, the Clifton House, Jupiter Magazine, everybody for bringing us all together here. I have been crying all morning, and I'm going to be crying some more, I'm sure, but it's such an honor to be here, to be in this space, to all be here together at a time like this to share space. And we are here all as visual artists who really overlap in so many ways, not only from coming out of the womb with our brushes and our wands, but also through performance, through spiritualism and how that overlays into our work, and to opening up doors and portals through the making of our hands. And one of the things for me, and we're all gonna respond, I'll be prompt, I'm also moderating. But for me as a maker, as someone who uses my hands to create my language, I'm so gratefully indebted to the high priestesses of sound and word and poetry who can help me articulate myself in this world in a way that makes it more round and more full and more true. And so we're all going to talk about how we were introduced to Lucille's work, but Joyce, I'd love to start with you. You and Miss Lucille are contemporaries. Oh. You and Lucille are contemporaries, and we are very curious. Did you know or were you aware of her and Mr. Fred's work? Did you cross paths with either of them around town before your departure from Baltimore in the early 80s? And could you share a couple stories with us and just...
Sure. I was not a road
Mike.
buddy.
Mike.
I'm so used to being the loudest one in the room. And what I was saying is, you're sitting on someone's phone. Okay. I'm just getting radiation burning in his hoo-ha, but who am I? Who am I to try to save someone's life? Forgive me. We weren't road dogs, but I definitely crossed paths a lot with Lucille. I was a performer for years. One of the groups I worked with, was only two of us, was called the Thunder Thigh Review. We wrote our own work and we traveled around the country and to Europe, Canada, doing work. And of course, Lucille was not only a friend, but also an igniting force in what we did. Mary Carter Smith was also alive. She was also a mentor for me, and also this whole griot group. I was a rascal, so the stories I told were a hair different. I have been, if not to this house, another house with Lucille, and we would talk. The thing that I said about her is how I felt righteous she was. Not self-righteous, but righteous she was. How she dealt with justice in her work. And that was one of the things that I've always tried to be true to. The fact that she was internationally known, but stayed with her peeps, with her people, and stayed here in Baltimore on either side, preferably the west side. And that the things that I always remembered about was how casually wonderful she was. It was not a kind of forced persona. She was just, and it's not just, she was that glowing light that you could cop a hit from. And that was very important for someone who was a tad younger and who saw the world completely open for them. My parents were sharecroppers, and I am the manifestation of their dream. And I'm sure that she was that for her family. I'm in no way saying that her family were sharecroppers, because we all think we have the exact same background. Well, we don't. We have parents and grandparents and folks who were presidents of colleges and who invented stuff. That was not my background. But I surely believe that she was, as you are for her, a manifestation of what could happen if we were forthright. And that doesn't mean necessarily extra rich, but just living in that light that was provided by them. Those glowing steps, you stand in those footsteps that are on fire, and you just get that heat enough to make a footstep for someone else, and that is surely what she has done. Applause, thank you. They're trying to make up after the things they did to me.
Thank you, Phylicia. And this is, we're going to keep this open, so if anybody wants to pop in and say things, please go ahead. Miss Lucille considered herself a two-headed woman. Your work honors ancestral knowledge, collective memory, thresholds, and archival assemblage. Do you also identify with walking the earth with a two-headed spirit? And if so, are you guided in your work by this?
I would say absolutely, yeah. I didn't know Miss Lucille personally, but just through this experience, I've gotten to know her in a really beautiful way through Sydney, through Gillian, through, Alexia, through this house, through the energy. I can feel her, okay? Even last night, it just brought me to tears just being here and hearing all the stories, and the feeling was palpable. I could feel Miss Lucille here. So I'm really grateful for just that, just the connection that I've been able to develop with her spirit through this experience, and also through discovering her work when I did. When I discovered her work, I discovered her work a long time ago through research, and I was really enamored by I think what Professor Jeffers talked about yesterday, which is the brevity and the power and just the skillfulness with words. And what I found is that with very little words, Miss Lucille was able to touch on the core of a thing, was able to articulate the thing that was hard to articulate, was able to create an emotive experience with just a few words. And that, to me, is really, really, really powerful. I would say, as I can't remember who said it yesterday, but I'm long-winded. So I don't have that skill. But I love it because I feel like one of the ways that I am a two-headed woman is through emotion. I can feel things. I feel everything. Almost like water sign woman, and I also have water signs in my chart, so I feel everything, and in that way I intuit, and in that way I excavate, and I archive, and I unearth stories of my lineage. And I feel that that's a lot of what Miss Lucille did in the way that she wrote about her family's history and generations, and just learning about just having that, like, not even just for her immediate family, but for us to see that, and for us to understand the depth of our ancestors, the depth of their emotions, the depth of their feelings, the feelings that they must have felt. So in some of Miss Lucille's poems, I can feel those feelings. And I would say that she was like a channel. And I also think of myself in that way. A lot of my work comes through dream, through a felt experience, through a vision, through, I would just say through this intuitive knowing. One of my favorite, I don't want to talk about everything right now. I'm taking a while. But long story short, yes, I 100% agree with that. And I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to have this opportunity to be sitting with you two. And, you know, I just really, really feel her energy in this space.
May I tag on to that? You said brevity, and that made me think of the image of her, seeing her, being a mother of 6. There is when you have 6 children, you got other things to do. So, and a husband and a house. So I think about the speed and the velocity in her writing sometimes, and sometimes how they are shorter verses. And that's like, there's other parts of the world I am responsible for. And then once again, that goes right back to what it means to be an African American, a black person in the United States, in the world, in fact, and to be a black woman. Now, I think of us, I don't know the year that she was born, but I was born in 1948, which is right after the Second World War. And this is a sweet spot in many ways because of people coming back and trying to evolve and change. You can see that in the artwork that came out of that period, and how we persevered and how we defied people who said, well, we'll give them money for their houses, but not you, black people. We'll build projects for you. Well, okay, we'll live in them, and then we'll go buy our own house. And that kind of stick-to-itiveness, I think, only enhanced her glow. I think of her as a winged messenger. I see all those things on Instagram of the angels, Azrael, and all those other things, and they're usually white guys with a 12-pack, not even a 6-pack. But when I'm thinking about the kind of messenger she was, the kind of angelic, kind of supernatural force that she was, I'm seeing her with the short gray hair, some wings, maybe a second pair in case, you know, she gets in a fight and has to, you know, take off one of them. Coming down, and just through that immense glow and the force of those wings and the air coming from them, she has ignited within people the desire to be poetic in their life. It's a big deal. You know, we as black people have that. We can't help it. You know, when you're in the kitchen, you're just talking about, you see I put the pepper in the ripper dipper? You know, when you're eating and doing the fingers and somebody is, that is what we are. To have someone who can harness it with a plum, not a plum, with a plum. Look it up. Oh, you gave me that look. To have somebody who can not just harness it, but repackage it constantly so it has something new to say. Damn, y'all.
I think, oh, go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, in thinking about this idea of brevity or impulsivity, or the idea or the muscle that we're constantly working as artists, when as a visual artist, I'm constantly trying to listen to the signals and the direction that's being given to me and how I'm working or how I'm responding to something. And, you know, when I came to Lucille's work, I had to go all the way to Stockholm to pull Hilma off Clint and her practice within spiritualism to start to engage with that dialogue through abstraction and through work. And when I found Lucille, it was like a whole different level of understanding that. And I think to be able to be concise and to deliver such powerful messages as a channeler is a really incredible thing. What did you want to say, though?
I was going to say, kind of similar to what you were going to say, to what you just said, but it made me think of both of what you both said, Auntie Joyce and Kennedy. It reminded me of the poem that Professor Jeffers shared last night. I was going to share it today because I love it. It's like one of my favorites, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, just the power of that. Why some people be mad at me sometimes. Because it's like, to that, the quality of even the title. I can't break it down with the quality that Professor Jeffers did yesterday, but just the energy of the title alone is like, I already know I just already know. You know what I mean? Hold up, I'm gonna read it. I brought it so that I could read it because I don't want to mess it up, even though it's short. I don't want to mess it up.
Mike, so you don't have to.
Sure, thank you. I have a few notes. Why some people be mad at me sometimes? They ask me to remember, but they want me to remember their memories. And I keep on remembering mine. So I'm just like, yes, just the agency. I think it's so important, like as a Black woman, to, like you said, Auntie Joyce, to distill the truth into this, something you can drink back and digest, and it just hits. And it's like you can relate to that. But it's even deeper than that, because it's like she is saying, I'm keeping my agency. I'm not going to be convinced away from my inner knowing. I'm not going to be convinced away from or indoctrinated. Like this is what I know to be true. These are my memories. And so I love that so much. And I work a lot with memories in my work. I work a lot with, and I have a lot of memories that live within my bones and in my body. So I would say that in that way, I connect with Miss Lucille as well.
The show I created called She is a Verb is very much about that. It's about that agency and the action. And I think a lot of times really the permission that Lucille provides for so many of us. And I came to Lucille's work through a wonderful local poet, Kevin Young. I don't know if you guys know him. He's at the Smithsonian Museum. And it was a couple summers ago, and I had this copper material that I was working with, which is this very soft material, and it's also a really powerful conduit. And I was making these pieces, and they all felt like I was hanging out with my friends. It was like these kind of languid women that are laying around and talking shit and having fun. And that was just dressing well, looking great, doing all the right things. And Kevin came in there, he's like, have you heard of Lucille? And I was like, no, I've never heard of Lucille before. And of course, as soon as I did, I was like, everyone needs to know about Lucille. And that whole summer, her words and her language infused my world and infused this work in a way, and offered a direction for it and an opportunity for me to create an ode to her and her life and her work. And the materials that I work with often are that. I think people, they talk about objects as these things, but the things that we're making are just containers of our life experiences. And I think that being able to reflect on her and allow those words to imbue the material actually made those women come through even more thoroughly and more clearly when you were hanging out with them in a room. So my mother was a writer, and she was a writer who never wrote anything. But she was someone who had a deep love for language, and even now in her early dementia, she's constantly correcting grammar and just pulling up a storm around words and language. And so being here today and being able to be with so many facilitators of poetry and of the word, and just really why we're here and why we're existing is it's such an honor and a pleasure. And I want to talk a little bit about Baltimore. So Baltimore is such a hub of creative energy. As folks that call this city home, what do you guys believe makes Baltimore special and seemingly magical grounds for Black makers and thinkers? And what have you found in this community that still may be alive today?
Negroes.
Accurate.
Okay, so this is one of the first original 13 states. Baltimore is the largest city within Maryland. Baltimore was a place that had one of the largest communities and populations of free slaves, as well as slaves who had purchased. They would be, as well as slaves who had purchased. So when I say a purchase, I mean freedom. So, Druid Hill Park supposedly was a plantation. I was raised in Sandtown, parts of Sandtown in the very beginning. Lorman Street was the Lorman Plantation. Slaves walked around from different plantations to do different jobs. Their footsteps are on everything. And when I say that, I do not try in any way to diminish other ethnic groups within this city. But for nothing, we are the majority because of how we have stayed and how we consistently are procreating, not only humans, but ways of being and the community, and how we have meshed and intermingled with other communities who already come with their blackness. So, you know, when you're at some, you know, Dominican restaurant, they part black, they don't want to say it, but that's true. You know, when we're talking about different Jewish communities, some are Ashkenazim, but there are many who are also black Jews. Did you just go on and on? That kind of richness is, for me, one of the things that makes this such a great city. And here's the other thing. My mother always said to me, and I said earlier they were sharecroppers. She was from South Carolina and picked cotton. My father's from North Carolina and picked tobacco. She said to me, I shall not be denied. That is what she told me to say. And that is what I felt the African American community has done through all kinds of outrageous, you know, turmoil and backstabbing. We didn't tiptoe it. We didn't sugarcoat it. We kept being us. Now, there are some, you know, negative parts of that too, because we're just human. But for me, it really is the blackness, and it is also what people come for. They may not know it, but you know, the crabs, they're not here for crabs made in French style.
I can second that. Baltimore is very black, and Baltimore is, I think, along those lines, is a harder place to gentrify than most. We staying put in Baltimore. So I think that there's a resistance here, and there is, for me, if I speak from a personal standpoint, Baltimore has my family here. Like that's what it is for me, and also there's a realness about Baltimore. Like, people not gonna placate you, you know, they're gonna tell you what it is and what it's not. And you know, those real Baltimore people would do that. And so my family is here, and I have a long lineage in Baltimore. Like my grandfather, he's an artist. He taught me from the time I came out the womb. From the time I could hold a pen or a pencil, he was teaching me anatomy. He was teaching me to illustrate. He was teaching me things. And I think about him a lot as we are here in the Clifton house, and just about family legacy and how special it is to be able to honor your mother in this way. And I dream of doing that for my grandfather and my grandparents. And my grandfather, he illustrated for almost every publication in the city. He stomped the streets looking for a job as a young artist in the 70s when it was hard for him to find a job. He started in the mailroom of an ad agency, worked his way up until he became junior art director at a time when, you know, it wasn't black people in those positions. So there's a history here for me that's really personal. And I find really interesting things happen artistically for me because of that. I just did a residency, and I was working on a quilt with my grandmother, and the quilt has a lot of family photos. And one thing that I love that Miss Lucille said is that poetry and art are not about the answers. It's about the questions. And I was asking a question with the quilt. It was an invocation, really. And I was asking it to teach me, tell me about the parts of myself that I don't know. Tell me about the lineage that I don't know. And as we quilted and as it's taking shape and it's still happening, all I literally had to do is hang it up in a room. And I had cousins just showing up. It was wild. And that's another thing about Baltimore. Everybody related. So you got to check into that, before you start dating people. So, yeah, literally, my cousin, I was in my residency. I hung up the quilt. I'm standing there, and then this guy comes to the door, and he's like, hey, do you teach drawing workshops? And I was like, yeah, I teach workshops, but you have to come back. I'm doing a meeting. And then he left, and I think he followed me on Instagram. I started pondering. I looked at his photo, and I was like, hold on, do I know him? And he came back the next day, and he was like, we're cousins. I was like, oh my, Andre from back in the day? What? Hold up. I ain't seen you since you was 7. So that's Baltimore. You know what I mean? So from a personal standpoint, that's why I'm here. My grandparents are super special to me. And my mother, too. My mother is a poet. So that also, I would say that's my connection to the words. My work deals with words a lot. I use my body to write words. I have a performance work that I do called Intrepid, where I'm using my body to write in a spiral formation. And it's using charcoal, and my body is wiping up the charcoal as I go. And it's all about really creating this moment where I'm sort of existing in this space between birth and death, between 0 and 1, this transitory space. And so what I love about that is that I feel like Miss Lucille also created through transitory spaces. And so with that work, the words are something that I'm literally stepping into. They end up covering my body. And I think that the reason why words come into my work in a way that's both physical and that has this poetic quality is because of the combination of my grandfather, who back in high school they told the black artists at the school he was at, he went to Carver in the city, and they said, oh, you're not gonna be able to be an artist, you're not gonna make any money, so you're gonna have to be a sign painter. So they taught him sign painting, and he hated it. He was like, I don't want to do this. And that's why he was canvassing the streets, busting through doors. He busted through the door at the Baltimore Sun, how y'all gonna give a black man a chance if he can't get a chance? And so, he didn't end up sign painting, but somehow I came out of his daughter's womb knowing how to illustrate words in this really painterly way. And then my mother being a poet, so those things kind of converged and created this this physical relationship I have to language. And so I think about that a lot, and when I think about Miss Lucille, because Miss Lucille was bringing breath and light and language to something that is so hard to articulate, and then creating a visceral response in us. And I, in my work, am using that visceral energy to create something physical. So it's interesting. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's I'm sitting here looking at this picture of Fred sculpting using his body, and I think that we all, especially as art makers, use our body as a tool and as a form of expression. And I think there's something about that, the repetition of doing something over and over and over and over and over again, that becomes not only meditative, but it becomes truly an extension of your cellular state. And this idea of transmutation, which Jack Whitten talks about a lot in a really beautiful way, the overlapping of consciousness and biography and belief and intention of what one is doing and how that goes into the work, how you summon your cousins because you're intending on bringing them into the room and into the work. And it's really an amazing thing as an artist and a maker to be able to go from thought into thing and to create a physical and manifest a physical object. As the world of black letters is so fundamental to the thought and practice of art making, what literary text has influenced your creative approaches, and what texts still influence your work today?
She's looking at me?
I'm looking right at you.
Well, the Bible. You know, I was raised in a Pentecostal church. My godparents were the preachers, and I even did street ministry, basically because I had the tambourine. I was cute, so I got extra money. I stopped reading a lot, basically because I'm spending all my time making artwork. So I actually listen to things. It's more, for me, more about people than it is my reading. That was my youth. You said something earlier. You started with Baltimore doesn't, it's a D word, wasn't it? Baltimore doesn't, no, that's not a D.
Yeah, I know.
Lord. It's that word about how, well, anyway, I think I'm not a big reader. I'm not going to go back to that because that's a whole other thing. I'm not a big reader. I'm a maker. I'm someone who transports the words that I used to read. I still write some. And the words that come to me just out of everybody into my artwork. It has a lot to do with my also, sometimes you read in self-defense, especially if you are from a family of non-readers, and they were that not by choice. My mom talks about when they weren't picking cotton, they went to a one-room schoolhouse. And the white and the black kids were all playing in the front yard, but when they entered this ramshackled house, they were divided by an old sheet. That line, that dividing line, meant a great deal. So my parents didn't read and write very well. So you start reading in self-defense because that is not one of the building blocks for you unless you start building your own literary house. And they supported me in that because, once again, that's one of those dreams manifest. And I'm so very honored to be here and sitting on this stage because look at who we are, talking about the word being physical. You were speaking earlier and you're like, where did you have to go? Was Europe? Was it Germany? Where did you just? Stockholm. I had to go to Stockholm. I'm like, yes, you did. Because you have the ability to. People died to give us those wings. Damn. And when you're talking about what you do, so for me, and then there's always me. So when we're talking about the word, I think for me now, because of just time, the word is made physical for me, and I'm not doing a lot of reading anymore. But that's just me. Also, you know, there's a way where one transposes reading. When you're listening to others, they're just reading out loud for you. And that's another way, too.
I can't start working until I put my headphones in. There's something really special about using your, as just the way my brain works. I love to be moving, and that's how I can actually absorb information in a much more clear way than when I'm sitting. I'm sure you can relate.
I always have the TV on.
Yeah, something.
I always have the television on. I have memories of sitting in my mother's studio, quilting with her, and watching the stories. So I still watch The Bold and the Beautiful, The Young and the Restless, and now have you watched Behind the Walls, that new thing, Behind the Gate? Now, that informs my work because it shows how black people are consistently being modified and used in pop culture, and how we help inform and create the pop culture that people don't even know they're talking about us. But then, you know, she said, look at that. She's got the shoes match the top. And that one thing, I know the beauty shop she went to. And I'm talking about the white girls, right? So for me, it's a constant primer about how the world in which I lived in is changing, but in so many ways, especially about black consciousness and what we've given to this culture. Very much the same about how we're being employed as one of the commodities or one of the lines that facilitates this stuff, but we're still not respected and paid properly for it.
Phylicia, I loved reading about your relationship with your grandfather. It was so special. I was wondering, did he pass any texts or words on to you?
Well, I talked about that a little bit in the sense that my grandfather, he was reading the Bible. He looking at the TV. He definitely doing those things. But he not really passing me texts. He would pass me, what he gave me was the understanding of this way of being in the world. That's what he gave me, of this way of, in the same way that I've heard Sydney talk about Miss Lucille and how natural it was for her to be at the dining room table writing. Like that same way with my grandfather. I didn't know that everybody didn't have a house with a grandfather who was illustrating all the time, who was waking up at 5 a.m. to paint a mural on this wall of the house because it needed something, who was drawing spirals around the walls and sculpting and got plants everywhere, in a similar way to how this house was a center for you all. It was important. That's how my grandparents' house is. And so, in that he passed along so many things and is still giving me gifts because he's still making art. So he passed along so many things to me that don't have words. But I would say my mother, with her love of words, brought me a love of words. And some of the texts that I would say that have been of influence to me would be, starting with Miss Lucille, I would say I took this photo of my grandmother from behind, and she's up against this red painting that I was making. And the painting, I actually started to make it after I read this essay by Toni Morrison called The Sight of Memory. So that really impacted me. And then I started making this red painting, and my grandmother came and stood in front of it and looked up at it, and I just pressed the shutter. And it's this image of her with her hair and in these gray two buns. And it's just something really beautiful about seeing her from like that image of her without seeing her face, because it speaks to just this journey of Black women. And around that same time, for the first time, I read I Am Accused of Tending to the Past. And it still gives me chills, the poem. And so that deeply, deeply influenced me and really brought me closer to delving more deeply into Miss Lucille's work. I Am Accused of Tending to the Past is one of my favorites. Have y'all heard it? Okay. Okay, I'm gonna read it. I think I got it in here somewhere. Thank you. Oh, yeah. And I think it's very apropos for this moment, for today's, what's going on in today's society, which is what I think is really beautiful about Miss Lucille's work. I am accused of tending to the past. I am accused of tending to the past as if I made it, as if I sculpted it with my own hands. I did not. This past was waiting for me when I came, a monstrous, unnamed baby, and I, with my mother's itch, took it to breast and named it history. She is more human now, learning language every day, remembering faces, names, and dates. When she is strong enough to travel on her own, beware, she will.
Thank you. That's so beautiful.
May I say something?
Please.
You would go to your house and all your relatives were there, and they'd be saying things like, "She just like Aunt Mabel." And then scientists would say about nature and nurture, and that's not true. She's just been with us. Now we know that our DNA also brings with us things like words and art, and those things that we got from somebody, that also travels on that line. So I think that the words that we are hearing are whispered to us anyway. They're just inside of us. They're our marrow. They're parts of us that exist. And I cannot underline enough why I said Negroes. It has been our job to make a way where there was no way in making something out of nothing. And one of the mystical things, one of those alchemical things that writers do is take this invisible word and make it physical. That's some deep, deep shit right there. To make this kind of thing into a magic where you can throw a word out and it becomes a whole story, an environment, an entire book for somebody else through this is amazing. And so when she's talking about tending to the past, she couldn't help because it was already riding her. Right. You know, but we have to be proud of that. We have to be proud of it and not get angry also when K-pop, when the Korean folks are acting black and dancing around. I think we're like this. Well, they just found the truth. That's the way I see it. They just found the truth. And who knows what's in their DNA? Us. Just said it. Sorry.
I appreciate you guys kind of bringing us home and bringing us to this place where we can really. I'd like to open the conversation up for questions in a minute or so. Just thinking about, what is home for us as artists? We're always traveling in different places. We're kind of having to move. But when you can set up and you can have your studio space and your things where you want it, it's really a privilege and an honor to be able to work and live like that. And I'm really excited for what the Clifton House is going to provide for artists and generations and for Baltimore. So with that being said, do we have questions? Questions, comments, concerns, revelations.
Reflection.
Oh, y'all got to have some.
Come on.
Someone.
Lunch.
I think what is striking me is the commonality of art and words in the Black experience and the Black family experience. And can you talk about why it's just not celebrated? Like you talk about our image in pop culture, that is directly opposite of what they'd like to think about us. And so I guess it's not so much a question, but gratitude that you all have brought that not only to us so that we can reaffirm it, but to the world. And so maybe how important is that to get that out?
I mean, my first thought is just ownership. I mean, it's really about ownership and being able to create the spaces, build the homes, and own and choose where and how our language is carried.
I believe we do it. I just think we're possibly trying to move with the wrong definition about it. The way we walk, the way we talk, the way we dress, the way we make a path for others to follow or to divine. It's a definition to be divine in. I don't think we've lost a thing. I just think that we're wearing different armor now, and that we have to remember we've been humans for thousands of years. So I believe that other people, when I say they got the truth, they don't know what to do with it yet. But others are watching who we are. Some have jealousy, some are amazed. But we ourselves can't lose who we are. Now that might be the thing about not knowing. The idea that if we become a doctor and we have to wear a white coat and we can't wear orange every day, whatever those stereotypes are, that we lose our blackness. But how do you lose your DNA? You do not. So maybe the reverence that we need to show to each other because of it, that might be some of it. But I'm not de-Negroed because I went to graduate school in Mexico. I just colored that joint up. Okay, I think we do a disservice to ourselves when we believe that we are not working full force. When we believe that, I mean, out of 8 billion people in the world and we're still alive and influencing everybody, we're doing something right.
Yep.
So I wanted to ask this question because you're going into this topic, but how do you think, or what do you think moving forward in this new age of like AI and how it translate with our, I'm an artist as well, so how we as artists who channel more of an ancestral intelligence and what do we do with an artificial intelligence moving forward, and how is it gonna, do you feel like we should use it? Do you feel like we should be in the middle? How do you think we should transcend it moving forward? Because I think about this writing those poems that Phylicia was reading and thinking about that writing in that depth, but now people can go and take those words and try to transform it through a computer. I just want to kind of like feel like what you think moving forward, how we should move, and what's your advice?
Anytime you back out of anything, you have no control. So I would like for us to be as savvy as everybody else. And don't think we aren't. All those people who are selling drugs and those kids who aren't going to school, many of them are geniuses, but they are not having the wherewithal to bring that glow out in them. So the idea that, you know, I read something, I do read a bit, about how, but not the way you meant, about maybe by 2030, AI may have taken many of the jobs that we have and will be thinking on their own. Well, so does that mean we have to acquiesce to that? Does that mean that we can't make a better AI, an AI? Why must we relent? We come from people who did not relent. Am I wrong? We came from people who every time something was taken from us or changed, we made it new, different, and made another one. So why should we be afraid? You know, we're all gonna have robots in the house, and give them names like, hey, Butch, go get me. From the kitchen, you know we're all gonna do it, so why are we acting like we should not be part of it and own part? Because you know, black kids are out there already designing stuff and doing, so why do we allow ourselves to think that we shouldn't be right up in the mix? Yeah. I don't see it. I agree with you. Because if you're not in there, then you will be in the jail with AI guards. I mean,
Yeah, I also feel that too. You know, we've had a lot of apocalyptic movies made about the future and what it looks like and what it is. And I also think there's a chance and an opportunity to think about and imagine what that utopia could look like. That movie hasn't been made yet. So how do we use it? What do we want it to look like? What do we want it to feel like? And how can it support and make more time for our sitting and thinking about our words, you know?
Hi there. I've been just so enchanted by this panel. I have a question. I'm from Trinidad, Caribbean, and so I'm intrigued by, or I have questions about how more global or diasporic blackness, or literature or art, if that informs the work that you're doing. I mean, I've lived in the States for 28 years at this point. And so there's very much the points of connection and then the points of completely different history, right, as a black person from elsewhere. And so I always feel like I'm both at home and learning, right? And so I'm curious what has felt at home, what has felt like learning about blackness in other spaces that you might have encountered and how it impacted your work.
I'm always learning about blackness in many spaces. I mean, I think that for me, it's just always been about exploration, being a very white-looking biracial woman, being raised by a black woman. I'm always discovering my blackness and what it means and how many different ways it can unfold and show up. So wherever I go, I'm always learning.
You know, there are also ways of learning when you light-skinned did. I'm thinking about her. I know that I've been in more, I've traveled the world, thank God. I've been blessed with that. And I've been maybe in a Caribbean setting or in a setting that's Central or South American where they don't exactly know who you are until you open your mouth. And then if you learned how to hablar español, then you know, maybe you can sound like them for a while. So the things that you hear when you look like her must be profoundly agitating because folks don't always know who they're with because many of us hide in plain sight. And for those folks who are much darker skinned, and I've heard this from great friends, who go to Africa and be mixing around, and then they hear Africans say horrendous things about African Americans, but you're hiding in plain sight. And I don't think you're hiding, that's just the term. I just know that it is important for us to be everywhere and have an investment a part of everything. Once again, less than we're going to be. We are the people who made everything happen. The entire economy of the world came out of us. Picking cotton and rice, mills making fabric, disseminating that product and that knowledge around the world. The Indians didn't do cotton until, right? The Chinese were fighting, and I don't know if you know, but there were Africans in China coming with the Spanish and the Brits in the 1600s. We've made a difference everywhere. So I am always there listening and trying to find out and try to remedy some of the illnesses that people have, the misunderstanding and the lies that they hear about us. Unfortunately, there are as many of us doing that as who are out there doing the opposite. There is on Instagram, and I use a lot of pop culture, there is on Instagram, I guess they're different sites. I don't exactly know their page or whatever. But it is a gorilla. Have you seen her? With the long nails, pink hair. A gorilla, an AI gorilla, who's a black woman. And she's talking about everything like that. And and I'm like, when did we become apes again? And then there's another one called Big Niggas, Nigazz. And it's all about very fat, very dark, very rich black men who are the big niggas. So they've got their own, they get everything they want. There are no black women in it. They all have snow bunnies who are very anorexic white girls. And I'm thinking, well, what? I think I understand that that's a double-edged sword, right? But why does that have to be the language that we spend all of that energy in? Especially the ape one. The ape one, you're just like, oh. So I'm well off the mark now, but I'm really going back to when you talk about this internationality that we all have to be part of. I believe that I had to be, and I still in many ways have to be, that super negress. And people are like, I don't want to be a super negro. I want to be like everybody else. I'm like, I want to be a super negress because I am. I want to be with all of the, I want to be the Disney Channel, and I want to be with all of those superheroes in a really tight latex thing. That will take my cellulite and press that down so it don't look like bumps. Why shouldn't I want to be that? Why am I deciding that it's all right for me to be okay? Those slaves who walked over brambles to get to freedom, Harriet Tubman had an axe and a gun, and when people like her, I'm going back, she said, well, so that I don't have to lose all these people, I'm just gonna chop your ass up. Yes, Miss? Why can't we be those super people? So I will not be denied. I will not accept less. And when I was doing a lot more teaching, or when I do my artwork, I'm always the best. Because someone died for me to be that person. I'm off that soapbox.
Okay, we got. Sorry. Say one more time. Yeah, no worries. So I'm gonna have time for one more question. Again, we have more sort of intimate moments to have this sort of conversation. So, do you have a? Okay.
Hi, everyone. Something that is so resonant to me about Lucille's work and art is her ability to deeply listen to spirit and convey what she's heard very plainly and honestly. I'm wondering if you all could talk about your practices for deeply listening or lessons pulled from Lucille's ways of deeply listening and conveying that in her work.
I'm going to start first because I talk so much and then I'll shut up. Everything that I just said, I think is completely she. I think she is one of those super people, but she didn't have to wear a costume. She didn't have to have physical wings, but she was that.
I would say the main way that I can hear spirit more clearly is I have to check out a little bit of things. I'm a caregiver, so I always have a lot on my plate. But one thing that I found is going to the ocean. Like sometimes I just pick up and go. And that's important to me. Nature is important to me. That helps me hear more clearly. I even, when Joelle and Janae gave me a tour of the house, I was walking through the yard, and I kind of had a moment out there. And so nature is like really important to me in that way. Water is really important. Baths, spiritual baths, just a long bath is important. So the elements, a lot of my work is sensory, multisensory. So I like to engage all the senses simultaneously in a lot of my installation work, and that allows me and whoever is experiencing it to come to the moment, to become present. So sensory exploration is something that brings me back into the moment and helps me be clear enough to hear what's being communicated.
One of my biggest qualms with how art making is taught is that it's taught through critique and work and pain, doing all that. And I think that one of the privileges that we have as artists is that ability to hear and to see and to feel. And we have all of these extra sensitivities of our senses. But what I really would like to encourage, and what I try to do in my own practice, is the idea of, once you stop, when you're going on a walk, when you're hanging out with your friends, when you have the idea in your head, it's the moment you stop that the answers come. And truly, it's when your body is held that you can receive information. And so I think that, when we were talking a little bit earlier about this kind of repetition and working this muscle, and it's interesting to think about Lucille like starting with the Ouija board, but she was working that muscle of being able to listen and move and be moved, which then became channeling and then became opening. So I think it's about working that muscle and opening the conduit and the impulsivity, and also that the brevity in the answers can be so simple and silly and not what you expect, and the willingness to trust that.
I know I said I wasn't going to say anything else, but I think Lucille just whispered something to me, and I know how that sounds. Because I speak a lot about excellence, and that is about, I'm sitting on the stage with two ladies who have that, and Lucille actually had the ability to not settle for less within yourself. And I can tell you when you were talking what she and other folks were just saying to me. When I am less than excellent, then there's somebody who was lynched who's still hanging. Every time she wrote something that was amazing, another soul got freed up. Another person dropped off a tree. Another person wasn't picking in the sun. Every time we do that, we release those who suffered for us. That's so deep. So that's why I don't settle for less. That is why when you talk about her words, they brought that to me. That's through her words, another soul was released. That's deep.